Welcome back to Dark Shadows Recap. In this video, we are breaking down a gripping German-American psychological mystery thriller called Flightplan. Major spoilers are ahead. Prepare yourselves, because this becomes an incredibly difficult night for Kyle Pratt. Kyle is an American aircraft engineer who has recently lost her husband while living in Berlin. She is now transporting her husband's body back to the United States with her 4-year-old daughter, Julia. To cope with overwhelming anxiety, Kyle takes medication prescribed by her doctor. The following morning, heavy snow falls outside as a taxi arrives to take them to the airport. While moving through the terminal, Kyle suddenly loses sight of Julia, sending her into a panic. She looks around and notices unfamiliar faces, families, travelers, and crowds of adults. But there is no child in sight. Then she turns once more and finally spots Julia standing near a small gift shop. Still shaken, Kyle gently warns Julia not to wander away without telling her. Soon afterward, the two prepare to board an aircraft that Kyle herself helped design. They are the first passengers to step inside the cabin. Julia quietly gazes out through the window. She breathes onto the glass until it fogs up, then carefully traces a tiny heart with her finger. Watching her daughter, Kyle slowly drifts off to sleep. When she suddenly wakes up, Julia is no longer sitting beside her. Kyle quickly questions nearby passengers, but no one remembers seeing the little girl. A flight attendant suggests that Julia may have wandered off to play with children around her age. Kyle searches the aisle from end to end, yet Julia is nowhere to be found. Her concern steadily grows as she keeps looking throughout the cabin. She even returns to the row where they had both fallen asleep. She lifts the blanket and finds Julia's one-armed teddy bear underneath. But Julia is gone. That makes no sense, because Julia never goes anywhere without her favorite bear. Kyle immediately asks a flight attendant named Stephanie to help search for Julia. Stephanie agrees and announces that a child is missing. Moments later, Stephanie delivers a shocking update. According to the flight records, there is no evidence that Julia ever boarded the aircraft. Kyle is left completely stunned. Certain that Julia boarded with her, Kyle reaches for the boarding pass to prove it. But to her disbelief, Julia's boarding pass is nowhere to be found. She also notices that Julia's backpack has disappeared from the overhead compartment. That seems impossible because Julia is far too small to reach it on her own. As the situation becomes more unusual, Sky Marshal Jean Carson starts watching Kyle while she continues searching for her daughter. Kyle demands to speak with Captain Marcus Rich and asks him to personally assist with the search. After hearing that no official record shows Julia on board, Captain Rich asks whether Kyle is currently taking any medication. Kyle explains that she has been using prescribed sleeping pills to manage the anxiety caused by her husband's death. She also reveals that her husband died after falling from the roof of their home 6 days earlier, although she refuses to believe it was suicide. After hearing everything, the captain and several crew members begin to suspect that overwhelming grief has affected Kyle's judgment, and that she only believes Julia boarded the flight. Kyle refuses to give up and insists on searching every section of the aircraft from front to back. Although hesitant, Captain Rich finally agrees and instructs the crew to conduct a complete search. The cabin lights switch on, and an announcement instructs every passenger to remain seated during the search. Stephanie heads into the avionics section and carefully checks every area, but there is still no sign of any 4-year-old girl. While continuing her own search, Kyle notices an Egyptian passenger. She approaches him after realizing his face seems familiar. She struggles to remember where she has seen him before, but her thoughts remain clouded by stress. Kyle then asks the captain to search the cargo compartment for Julia. Captain Rich refuses the request and firmly points out that hundreds of passengers are being delayed because the entire cabin crew is searching for a child whom no one else believes was ever on the aircraft. Kyle reacts emotionally and immediately rushes toward the Egyptian passenger. She accuses him of abducting Julia after recalling that she had seen him the previous night looking toward Julia's bedroom window. The passenger strongly denies the accusation and presents evidence showing he stayed at a hotel located far from Kyle's apartment. The situation quickly becomes increasingly tense. Kyle desperately pressures the man for answers, and a physical struggle breaks out. Frustrated by everything that has happened, Carson remarks that her husband's tragic death now seems easier for him to understand after witnessing her behavior. A short time later, Captain Marcus receives a message from a hospital in Berlin stating that Julia was reportedly with her father when he fell from the roof, and that she also died from internal injuries. At that moment, the crew becomes convinced that Kyle is suffering from a false belief. Kyle fiercely rejects the claim, remaining certain that Julia is alive and somewhere on the plane. Believing Kyle now poses a risk to everyone on board, Carson handcuffs her and secures her to her seat. A therapist named Lisa approaches and gently tries to comfort Kyle, leaving her questioning her own memories. She slowly begins to wonder if her daughter truly is gone. Then Kyle notices that the small heart Julia had drawn earlier is still visible on the window beside her seat. That detail convinces her that something deeply unusual is happening. She persuades the therapist to allow her to use the restroom. Rather than entering the restroom, Kyle climbs into an overhead access compartment and disables part of the aircraft's electronic system, causing the oxygen masks to deploy and the cabin lights to shut down. The entire cabin falls into panic as both passengers and crew react to the sudden malfunction. Carson quickly realizes that Kyle is responsible. Taking advantage of the confusion, Kyle slips away and rides a service lift down to the lower cargo deck. She reaches her husband's casket and unlocks it, fearing Julia may have been hidden inside. Instead, she finds only David's body. There is nothing else in the casket. Carson soon catches up, handcuffs Kyle once again, and escorts her back to the cabin, while announcing that the flight will make an emergency landing at Goose Bay Airport, where authorities will take her into custody. As Kyle is escorted through the aisle, one passenger begins clapping. The applause gradually spreads across the cabin. Others simply watch her in silence, including the Egyptian passenger. When Kyle reaches the rear section of the aircraft, she stops and sits down. She makes one last request, urging Carson to let her search the plane after it lands. Carson pauses briefly, then claims he is going to speak with the captain. Instead, he secretly heads down to the cargo deck. There, he removes 2 hidden explosives along with a detonator concealed inside David's casket. He then enters the avionics section and secures the explosives beneath a platform, where Julia is revealed to be sleeping nearby. At that moment, the truth finally comes to light. Carson has been orchestrating everything from the very beginning. Carson and Stephanie have secretly planned to hijack the aircraft for a $50 million ransom while framing Kyle because of her knowledge of the plane. They kidnap Julia to force Kyle into opening the casket that concealed the explosives and detonator. Carson informs the captain that Kyle is hijacking the aircraft and threatens to destroy the plane unless the airline transfers $50 million into a designated bank account. He later tells a deeply shaken Stephanie that he intends to destroy the aircraft, leave Julia unconscious inside, and make it appear that Kyle was responsible by placing the detonator in her hand. Still struggling to understand everything that has happened, Kyle anxiously watches through the window as the aircraft prepares to land. The remaining passengers are equally confused by the unexpected emergency landing. After the aircraft lands, the passengers are evacuated. As Captain Rich prepares to leave, Kyle stops him. He angrily tells her that the ransom has already been paid, leaving Kyle completely confused. Moments later, she realizes Carson has manipulated the entire situation, making it appear as though she is the real terrorist. Understanding his plan, Kyle decides to use that false identity to her advantage. She orders Carson to stay on board while instructing the remaining crew to leave the aircraft. Carson hesitates, realizing that refusing her order could expose his own deception. The moment the aircraft door closes, Kyle strikes Carson with a fire extinguisher, knocks him unconscious, handcuffs him to a metal rail, and removes the detonator from his pocket. Stephanie finally emerges from hiding. Carson regains consciousness and pursues Kyle through the aircraft, firing his weapon until she locks herself inside the cockpit. Kyle opens an overhead access hatch and throws a binder into the upper compartment to mislead him. Hearing the impact above, Carson rushes away in the wrong direction. Kyle slips out and comes face to face with a guilt-stricken Stephanie. Kyle hits her once, sending Stephanie into panic before she quickly runs off the aircraft. Kyle continues searching through the avionics section and finally discovers Julia unconscious. She immediately embraces her daughter and carefully lifts her into her arms. Carson soon catches up and, while searching for them, reveals that he caused her husband's death as part of his plan to smuggle the explosives inside the casket, knowing it would not be inspected during security screening. Without hesitation, Kyle carries Julia into the aircraft's fire-resistant cargo compartment while holding the detonator. Carson fires toward them just before the heavy door closes. Protected by the reinforced compartment, Kyle activates the detonator. The explosives destroy part of the aircraft, and Carson is killed in the blast. Outside, the passengers and crew watch the explosion in complete shock. Moments later, Kyle safely emerges carrying Julia. As Kyle walks across the runway with her daughter in her arms, everyone finally realizes that she had been telling the truth from the very beginning. The following morning at the airport terminal, Captain Rich approaches Kyle and sincerely apologizes for doubting her. Stephanie is escorted away by FBI agents in handcuffs, while another agent confirms that the director of the Berlin mortuary has also been arrested. Kyle walks through the terminal carrying Julia as the surrounding passengers finally understand the truth. Many of them watch in stunned silence, filled with quiet regret for not believing her. just before placing Julia into a waiting vehicle. The little girl wakes up and drowsily wonders if they have finally arrived as they prepare to leave. In the final moment, the Egyptian passenger respectfully helps Kyle pick up her bag, offering a quiet gesture of understanding and forgiveness. With that, the story of Flightplan comes to an end. If you enjoyed this recap, be sure to subscribe for more stories like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to support the channel. Thanks for watching.